Hello everyone and welcome back to the Wine Guild. On this episode, we're going to go in a little bit different part of the world, a whole lot different part of the world than where we have been. We're going to the land down under, to Australia, to taste a Cabernet that I'm hoping is going to be a good experience. So before I do that, I want to say please like and subscribe, very important. Now that that's out of the way, I also wanted to do a shout out to Ralph Mucci, who is definitely part of Positive Tube. I unfortunately had a little bit of senior moment there, I guess, in that video, but I did put his link down into the description. So definitely check out Ralph's YouTube channel. It's great singing, great songs. You can't beat it. Check it out. Definitely worth watching. So sorry about that, Ralph. All right, so now before we get started here, I wanted to give a little bit disclosure here because I tend to be a little biased when it comes to Australian wines, and that's because of my experience with them. I haven't had the best experience with them over the years. So, and the reason for that is really the history around Australian wine. Now, the history goes back 1788. That was the first time that the governor there introduced vines to Sydney, Australia, which turned into vineyards. But it really didn't take off until the 1800s, 1833, sometime around there, when specifically a man by the name of, what's his name? I always write his name down because I always forget it. And it's not a hard name. James Busby brought over from Spain and from France cuttings from various vines and planted Grenache as well as Syrah. And somehow, and I don't know why or how this happened, but they started calling the Syrah grapes Shiraz. So when you see wines that are made with Shiraz, it's really Syrah. It's just an Australian name for the same grape. So just a little point there to remember. So anyway, vinting went on for hundreds of years, and it wasn't until the 1960s, late 60s, I guess, when Australia started to make wines that we traditionally know of. Prior to that, it was more like fortified wines, sugary fortified wines. Not like the traditional style that you would get if you go to the store and you buy red wine. So anyway, now, they were doing that for quite a while, and it really wasn't taking off. And then about 18 years ago, Australian wines kind of boomed onto the market. And the way they did that is really the reason that I don't really like Australian wines. So, and again, like I said, I'm hoping this one is different. It's going to change my outlook on that stuff. But the way they entered the market was they did something that we call cooking wines, which means they added a lot of sugar in the making process, in the vinting process. And the purpose was to raise the alcohol content, to also give more of a sweet taste, more of a fruity taste, to try to bring out the fruit taste, because that's what the market wanted. That's what they felt the market wanted. So, and at the same time, it was cheap. So it was a good combination, and it worked. And we saw Australian wines kind of boom and take over a lot of the market during that time period of the last 15 years. But that's not my type. That's not my cup of tea to have fortified wines or wines cooked with sugar to raise the alcohol content. Not my taste. First of all, I don't even like sweet wines to begin with. Obviously, that's going to make them sweet, so I'm not going to like them. But I also don't like the concept of cooking. I don't like changing or man-made solutions to changing the nature of a wine. I think the nature of the wine itself is inherent, and it's the job of the vintner to bring it out. So anyway, that's my little bias against Australian wines. But hopefully, I'm hearing good things about this particular wine and this particular region. So where does this come from? This comes from the Margaret River Valley in Australia, southwestern Australia. And the area in question is a peninsula. So it's three sides of water, which helps for the environment, for growing grapes, growing great wines, hopefully. The area in question is only about 14,000 acres, which is a small region considering some of the larger areas in the world that focus on wine. Napa, for example, that's only 1/3 of Napa's acreage. So it's a small region, Napa Valley. So the Margaret River is a small region. So I'm hoping these elements are going to make it a little bit different. A smaller area probably has more artisans in it, more people that take it seriously, more people that want to be more true to a wine spirit and pull out the terroir and cultivate it the right way. So we'll see what happens. This is a Cabernet Sauvignon. Cabernet is also not very big in Australia. It's the third most planted grape. So it's going to be interesting to see how it is. The name of this wine is Ring Bolt. So let's start our usual process here, right? First we talk about the label. Labels, again, is a simple label. Let's see if we can zoom in on this so you can get a good shot of it. Pretty straightforward. Bold, lowercase letters. It's fine. I mean, my first stage is always talking about how the label makes you feel. This one's okay. This one doesn't disrupt me. It also doesn't really give me much to the imagination. I mean, my imagination isn't going anywhere with this. It's just kind of basic, but it's fine. I like the color. I like the gray color. I like the simpleness of it. So it is a 2020 vintage, so it's relatively new. As Cabernets go, usually we wait a few years, let them sit in the bottle before you drink Cabernets. But well, let's see. So that's the bottle. Another thing I wanted to talk to you about is the soil there too, which makes me a little bit excited. The soil in this region is gravelly, so it's very similar to the soil in Bordeaux in France. So that's good because that is a traditionally classical wine producing region that has created great wines for centuries. So hopefully that element is going to help this wine as well. So I'm giving it all chances it can, right? I'm looking at it from as positive an angle as I can and hoping for the best, right? So let's see what happens. All right, let's start with, well, first, because I relatively opened it before, it's a screw top, which, the screw top doesn't really, it kind of takes away from the romance of wine. You're not popping a cork, but fine. The screw top is traditionally better for preserving the wine, so we know we're not going to get a bad wine, hopefully. And it hasn't been open long, so I'm going to have to use the aerator. All right, so let's do that. All right. Now the aerator, as you know, we've talked about this before, gets the wine to start oxidizing in a very fast fashion. As it goes through the inside, it's opening it up with air. So hopefully we're going to get some more openness. In the past we've had some trouble with wines not being open and not giving us much taste, which kind of ruined the experience. And it also has a strain which I'm not going to need for a young wine like this anyway, but it's there. All right, so let's put that back. All right, let's start with looking at the color. Now the color is like a deep ruby red with kind of highlights, like lighter red highlights around the edge. So that's an interesting color. Typical for a Cabernet, the smoothness, the smooth colory look, the smooth burgundy look of a Cabernet. It does have that, which is good. I like that. All right, legs on it, meaning legs are pretty high. What is the alcohol content? I didn't mention it. 14%. Well, and that's the other thing. A lot of times these wines, and not just Australia, it's anywhere. Producers will make the wines a little bit more higher in alcohol than they say on the label. So 14%, I would probably expect it to be 15, 15 and a half, even 16 at sometimes. So just keep that in mind, and that's why I always look at the legs, because the legs will tell you the amount of alcohol that's in it. Not too specific, but it'll just give you an idea that this probably has a higher alcohol content. Now let's go to the nose and smell this guy. I'm liking the smell. There's a tiny bit of sulfur in there, but I'm smelling fruit smells. I'm smelling bouquets, like a slight bouquet, flowery bouquet. And then that gunpowder, and even like a little bit of nutmeg, and that's from the oaking, I think. The oak barrels that it was in. So that's interesting, yeah. And the more I smell it, the more that gunpowder, or that I usually smell from the sulfur, is going away. And the nutmeg and the oak is coming through. It's more of a vanilla, more of a more of a caramel. I like it. And I also don't get the burn. Like a high alcohol content wine, you're going to get the burn on your nose. You're going to smell kind of the alcohol burning the insides of your nose. So that's good. We don't smell that, which is good. And this was in the fridge, so there's a bit of a precipitation on the glass because it was in the wine fridge. Normally, I would always say get to room temperature, but for the purpose of this, I think we're okay. I think with the aerator and the fact that I'm babbling and talking away, it's probably good enough to open this up a bit, and the temperature will start to get closer to room temperature. Yeah, that smell. I like the smell. I do. I like the nose experience. All right, so let's go on to the big question, the taste. All right, now this is interesting because I'm getting a whole bunch of stuff happening here. It's really interesting. I'm getting like a little bit of tartness from like an underripe fruit. Getting sweetness, not too much sweetness, which is good. Because normally my experiences with Australian wines is I get bombarded with sugar, and I'm not getting that here. So that's a big plus. Now, what fruit? What fruit am I tasting? Dark cherry, like a really dark red, deep cherry. Not getting any strawberry, which is not surprising. With Cabernet, you usually don't get strawberries. You're gonna get your more of the cherry, more of the dark cherry. I'm not getting much in terms of the plum. In terms of tannins are there. They're not overpowering. but they're also a little bit light for a Cabernet. The tannins are not strong enough for me. I like a stronger tannin where your mouth dries out from that. And instead of that long drawn out tannin taste, I'm getting more of that bitterness or that underripe fruit taste, which some people don't like. So be wary of that. If you don't like that stuff, you're not going to like this wine, because that seems to be, as it goes through the palate, it comes back on the back end. It started out at the beginning, went through the palate, came back on it, and I'm still tasting stuff. So it has longevity, which I like. It's taking a while to go through it. I'm not tasting the oak that I smelt, which is interesting. Usually you taste the oak. I'm not tasting anything like the caramel or anything like that, or the wood taste. And I'm also not getting minerality, which is something that they bill for that region, that the soils provide mineral. I'm not really tasting any minerality. But all in all, I think it's good. It's probably the best Australian wine that I've ever tasted. Now, I've never tasted high-end Australian wines. You know, there's some high-end ones that are really expensive. I've only tasted run-of-the-mill wines, and they've always been as I've described in the past. So this one is refreshing. I like this. I like that it is not totally sweet. It's a good balance. It has sweetness as well as the tannins drying you out. It has the traditional red cherry, dark cherry that a Cabernet will have. I really like the nose, which is great because that's part of the whole experience, right? From the label to the nose to the drinking, it's part of the experience. So I like the nose. It's just it's a nice little wine for $15, not expensive. So I'd buy this again. So I'd give this like probably a 3 or a 3.5 on the scale of 1 to 5, which is great for me in terms of Australian wine. So I mean, maybe that tells us that the Margaret River region is one worth exploring and looking more into, the wines that come from that area. As opposed to your yellowtails and your other stuff, which is just not good, in my opinion. Always my opinion, but just not good, and it's not for me. Even though it's cheap, it's not for me. Let me take one last sniff. Still getting that caramel smell, and then let's do one last taste. Yeah. I'm tasting more of the sweetness now than I did at the first round of sips. And for me, that's not good. I'm not a big, as you know, I'm into dry wines. So I would take it down from my original. And not below a 3 though. I would still keep it at a 3, which means I'd buy it again. So I mean, I think it's something worth looking into, worth trying, especially at the price point. It's good. So Ringbolt Cabernet Sauvignon 2020, Margaret River Valley, Western Australia. And I guess the producer is Heather Fraser. So check it out. See if your tastes are similar to mine. All right, so that's our wine for this evening. And we talked about history, right? We got in history. We got a little bit of that history around Australian wine. So that was our history part. In terms of a wine quote, I have one. I always have a wine quote. So the wine quote that I have is a Spanish proverb, and it says, "With wine and hope, anything is possible." So that's an inspiring quote. I like that. And as I always say, my quote is, let each bottle you open take you on an adventure. So this one did it. This one took me on an adventure. It took me to an area of Australia I've never been before. It took my nose someplace. It took my palate someplace. So it fits the definition of a wine adventure. So It was a good one. And as always, I think you have to try new things. Otherwise it gets boring, right? So with that, I'll say, as always, again, like and subscribe. Share if you know someone that likes our stuff. Happy to do that. And if you want me to taste something, put a note in the comments. Put something down there, a suggestion about something. If there's any questions, put down questions. I want to interact with you guys as much as possible. Like I said, I do this for fun. I do it for you guys to learn. I really get off on the fact that you guys are learning something and I'm helping you learn it. That's awesome, in my opinion. So with that, I'm going to say good night. And as always, build the guild. And thank you for watching The Wine Guild.